Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. It is January 21st, 2015. This is your host, Andrew Fisher, broadcasting every Wednesday from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it isn't. We have a very interesting guest indeed, who I met at the MUFON Symposium in Cherry Hill, New Jersey recently, Kathleen Marden, a UFO abduction expert, ET contact expert, and also we're going to talk about hypnosis. One little thing that many people don't know she's known for. Give her a chance to talk about that on the show. Was once named Ufologist of the Year by MUFON. She did recently send me a much longer biography through email. I can't go through that whole thing just for the sake of time. Want to cover the news and get her on the hour, no later than 10 after the hour. But just a quick few things here in the short biography. She is a member of the Foundation for Research of Extraterrestrial Encounters Advisory Board and a consultant to FREEZE, that's F-R-E-E in all capital letters, Research Subcommittee. She has 25 years of experience in the field of research that she does. She has a BA degree in social work from the University of New Hampshire, and she has participated in graduate studies in education while working as a teacher and education services coordinator. She also has training in hypnosis. By the way, I do see someone in the queue here, area code 352. If that is Kathleen Marden, I promise to get you on no later than 10 after the hour. But a couple of other things here. Her interest in UFOs dates back to September 20th, 1961, when her aunt, Betty Hill, phoned her nearby home to report that she and Barney had encountered a flying saucer in New Hampshire's White Mountains. A primary witness to the evidence of the UFO encounter and the aftermath, Kathleen has intimate knowledge of the Hills' biographical histories, personalities, and the previously unpublished historical files pertaining to their sensational story. She is the author of Captured, the Benny and Barney Hill UFO Experience, and also Science Was Wrong, which Stan Friedman was a co-author on. And by the way, I do miss not being able to see Stan Friedman at that MUFON Symposium. He suffered a mini heart attack. He probably was in good enough shape to get back. They said he was right back on his computer after getting out of the hospital, but the doctors probably wouldn't allow it. It's a shame. He's one of the greatest in the field, no question. And she had a picture of Stan on her table. Kathleen did pay respect for him. Everybody else paid respect for him. There's a couple of things I don't agree with that Stan has said, maybe just for the sake of having a nice radio conversation. I'll talk about that with Kathy. I did talk about it with Kathleen at the symposium for a little bit, but hey, let's bring it up for the sake of radio conversation. She also co-authored The Alien Abduction Files with Denise Stoner. Her essays appear in several books, and her articles have been published in the MUFON UFO Journal, Open Minds, and Fate magazines on several websites. She is recognized as a world-leading expert on the Benny and Barney Hill abduction, lectured throughout America, and appeared in television and radio programs on an international level. Well, Kathleen will get you on in a little bit, but first, before I get to the news, I need to point out a couple things. I will definitely be creating a Nature of Reality radio page on blogger.com. The Facebook Nazis have censored me. Again. Seems like the 100 millionth time. Zuckerberg is such a jackass. But anyway, the point is, every time I log on, they force me to log on every time I try to get on. Every time I log on to Facebook, they make me enter capture code, and my ban from posting to groups because I like posting my show on groups. Not because I'm promoting my show, which I'm not, but because I want to get the information of my show out to the public. I do that like in so many groups, make a living out of it, doing it like for hours on end at night, and Facebook doesn't seem to like that, so they've censored me again. And every time I log onto Facebook, my ban extends for like an hour or 90 minutes every time I log in. So I'm forced to take a Facebook hiatus, and I'll be back on Groundhog Day. And then to definitely create a Nature of Reality radio page on blogger.com, and I can guarantee you that in the not too distant future, I will also be making an official website for Nature of Reality radio. But with that said, let's get to the news, courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. Just need a quick drink of water here. First article, Deflategate. NFL refs allegedly never noticed deflated footballs. Were others involved in Deflategate conspiracy besides just the New England Patriots? We know the Patriots were in on the Spygate scandal. Spygate sounds like something the NSA would be in. But anyway, Spygate, the Patriots filmed the teams practicing, and it gave them an advantage in the games. And, the NFL, whether it's deflated balls, which would give a team an advantage if they knew about it, and also the referees calling penalties selectively, they do rig games that way. But most creepy of all, and Fritz Springmeier, who is not a conspiracy theorist, he takes facts very seriously, in my interview with him, when a caller called in and asked about sports, Fritz Springmeier did say that the Illuminati does control sports, and the NFL and NHL players and coaches are under trauma-based mind control. You can get the referees to call a stupid player, have a player fumble a ball against his will, and in the NHL, I guess that explains how they can get the hockey players to drop their gloves and start fighting with each other almost like instantly when nobody was expecting it. But now we have a deflated ball scandal. Wouldn't surprise me if games are rigged in that way too. Next article. Although actually, if anybody wants to learn more about sports rigging, check out my interview with the Fixes In author Brian Toohey. It's on my YouTube channel and on my show page on Blog Talk. Next article. Samsung responds to privacy concerns over TVs recording personal conversations. Are private communications being sent to the government? Yes, of course they're being sent to the government. The NSA is spying on the whole world, not just the headquarters in Maryland, the NSA headquarters, and the Utah data center. Those two places are just a dollhouse and a kiddie pool compared to some of the other things the NSA has. I guarantee you the NSA has bases on the moon, maybe a few bases on Mars. Yeah, there is a space program to Mars. Listen to my interview with Andrew Bishago if you want to learn about that secret space program, and other spying devices that are above the atmosphere of the Earth that make the or that are a mansion compared to the kiddie pool and the dollhouse that is the NSA headquarters in the Utah data center. And now these companies, Samsung or whatever, they're all spying. Yes, they are all spying. Snowden only released what people already exposed. Next article. Obama's State of the Union, more stolen stuff. Wealth redistribution scheme to rally Democrat base. I did watch the State of the Union. It was disgusting. Obama thinks we're really stupid. He's just a puppet. Maybe he doesn't need a teleprompter anymore because he knows what he has to say to support his masters. But yeah, it was a fraud, and it really got me really sick to see all the people in Congress stand up and applaud whenever he was talking about something terrorist related. The real terrorists are the tyrants in government. Need I say more? Next article. Russia and China furiously buying up gold as a global currency crisis, albeit unstated, is underway. Are you prepared? Is anyone? Brace yourself. Well, you know, Alex Jones and friends at InfoWars, they do like the publicity from fear-mongering, so they might make it sound a little scary and all that. But we are on a positive timeline from what other people say. So if we truly are going to transition from the dollar, which is set to collapse, and go to a gold-backed currency, and maybe eventually have no money at all after like maybe 7 to 10 years, hopefully sooner than that. But the word on the street is Russia, China, and the rest of the BRICS nations, and also Benjamin Fulford, his Dragon Society, are planning to release all the gold that is being hidden from us to get the gold-backed currency started, and hopefully that'll happen soon, because the dollar, it's putting us in perpetual debt, and Russia and China and the BRICS nations, they'll help us get out of that. They're starting to rebel, so to speak. The BRICS nations are against their Illuminati masters. Oh, goody. Next article, State of the Union 2015, politicians still win when America loses. The average politician is not remotely similar to the typical American in terms of wealth. Yeah, that's the way it's set up, the whole 1%, 99% thing that the Occupy movement always talked about. And Obama, he makes it seem like the economy is good when it's falling apart. Hopefully, it might be a little hard during the transition from the dollar to gold. Hopefully it won't be too hard. All right, 3 articles left. New cyberbullying law will force Illinois students to give up social media passwords. Students who refuse could face criminal charges, according to school superintendent. Yes, give up social passwords, the social media passwords, not just the college, the passwords. Okay, is the college working in tandem with the NSA? They probably are. Hope somebody does some research on that. Next article, Anonymous, State of the Union warning to Obama. Obama is a lie machine, says Anonymous. Yeah, I did watch that Anonymous interview. I wonder if it was just Alex Jones wearing a Guy Fawkes mask, or maybe it was really someone from Anonymous. I don't know. But watch that interview on the Alex Jones channel. Not that interview, that speech that Anonymous guy gives before the State of the Union address. It's you'll learn a few things from that. Learn Obama's a fraud. One last article. Obama calls for civility, then immediately taunts Republicans. The most divisive president in history. Yes, Republicans taking control of Congress. You know, Obama, the Democrats are, or should I say Democrips and Republicans, as Jesse Ventura would call them. I did read that book, by the way, Democrits and Republicans by Ventura. You know that the fighting is going to go up a lot more now that the Republicans have taken control of the Senate and the House. They're controlled by the same Illuminati masters, but they do fight each other like gangs, and Obama would play a big role in that. So, without further ado, first let me get a quick drink of water here. All right, let's see if this is Kathleen Marden. Area code 352, is this Kathleen Marden?
Yes, it is.
How you doing? By the way, since
I'm
you did
doing fine.
Glad to hear that. And since you sent me that extra long bio in that recent email you sent me saying that you'd call from a landline phone, is there anything that I didn't say in this abridged bio that you would like to get out?
No, that's fine.
Okay. So I guess let's start off with the thing that you're, I guess, not known for, and we'll save the best stuff for last, I guess, in this interview. But let's talk about hypnosis. I've had a lot of people on my show who are into hypnosis, not like the kind of hypnosis who you would see on a stage with people around him, and he would hypnotize everybody, and he would have to kick off stage the people that he can't hypnotize. No, not that kind of hypnotist. I'm like talking about regression hypnosis. I'm assuming that's the kind you do. What kind do you do, and how do you do it? Tell us all you know about hypnosis.
Okay. I'm a certified hypnotherapist. I was certified in the state of New Hampshire when I lived up there. And I developed an interest in the topic, actually, because my Aunt Betty Hill had undergone hypnosis, and my uncle as well, with Dr. Benjamin Simon back in 1964. And she was making claims about the powers of hypnosis and the special techniques that Dr. Simon had been using. And so I wanted to find out more about the topic to see if her claims were correct or if she was misunderstanding hypnosis. So I started really on a journey of discovery, spending time at the university reading all of the research projects that I could read about for an entire summer up there, and wrote a scholarly paper on that at that point. Since then, I had written another scholarly paper on the use and misuse and the ethical use of hypnosis. So finally, after doing a lot of reading and speaking and studying about it, I finally decided to get my certificate because I thought that it would give me more of a feel for what it actually was and what it actually did. So that's where I came from. I started out just becoming certified to do hypnosis, and then took several more courses, because once you get your certificate, you have to do education every year in order to keep it. So I eventually I did regression training, I did past life regression training, but the most important training, as far as I'm concerned, was the training in the use of forensic hypnosis, because the forensic technique teaches a hypnotist how to do hypnosis without leading the subject. It's the only type of hypnosis that used to be admissible in a court of law as evidence. Of course, it is no longer admissible. Hypnosis fell out of favor quite a long time ago when it was challenged by false memory syndrome researchers and a very vocal group of debunkers. So, when in the type of hypnosis that I do, I follow the technique that Dr. Benjamin Simon did. I have copies of my aunt and uncle's hypnosis tapes, and he was such an expert in the subject. He had worked after and during World War II. He set up the psychiatric unit at the Mason General Hospital on Long Island in New York. And he was a neuropsychiatrist, who was treating veterans who were returning from the war, who were suffering from shell shock, what we now think of as post-traumatic stress disorder. And these are soldiers who had gone to other psychiatrists and hadn't really had a very good rate of success. Dr. Simon was a real expert in the use of deep trance hypnosis in order to resolve this extreme trauma that these soldiers had experienced. And a movie actually was made about his work. It's called Let There Be Light, produced by John Huston, and it was produced during World War II. It was one of those movies that people could go to see in the movie theater on Saturday night to learn more about what was going on in the war. And what you would see is Dr. Simon, for example, would have a soldier who would come in who was blind. And he would take that soldier in. He used sodium pentothal and sodium amytal as well as deep trance hypnosis when he had to, but he had more control over the subject when he was able to use hypnosis without the drugs. And he would hypnotize the person. In one case, with the soldier who was blind, there was no physiological reason for his blindness. But Dr. Simon's special technique probed very, very deep, not only to find out what immediately caused the blindness, which was watching his buddy killed right before his eyes during the war, but also when the blindness did not resolve itself, he probed deeper, and he found out that a week before this, he'd received a Dear John letter from his sweetheart. So it was a combination of the two things that Dr. Simon recognized and was able to treat soldiers very successfully using that technique. And at the end of the movie, you would see these soldiers who were blind, who hadn't been able to walk, who had all kinds of disabilities that were emotionally based. And they were playing baseball, they were having physical therapy, and in the end, they were able to return home to their jobs and their families. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist like Dr. Simon. I use hypnosis not with people who are suffering from a psychiatric condition, but only with people who have undergone a psychological evaluation, and there is evidence that they won't be harmed by the type of hypnosis that I use. So let me use an example, because in the alien abduction files, I wrote about my colleague Denise Stoner's alien abduction experience, and her husband too. I hypnotized both of them in the same manner in which Dr. Benjamin Simon hypnotized my aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney Hill. He saw them separately, and I saw them separately. We did the hypnosis session, and I gave the suggestion for amnesia at the end of the session so that they couldn't share information and contaminate each other's information. Now, my technique is different from Dr. Simon's, because in Dr. Simon's technique, as a psychiatrist, he would push his patient, for example, Barney, to the limit. Barney would say, I don't want to go on, don't make me go on, this is just too distressing. And Dr. Simon would insist that he went on, and he released all of that emotion. That's what a psychiatrist does. What I would do, and when Denise got to this point, I would say, fine, then you can go back to your safe place, and would you like me to wake you up, to bring you up from hypnosis? She said yes after the first hypnosis session that I had with her. And let me tell you why. We had done the hypnosis, and then we had done the regression. And all a regression is going back in time to a previous point. When I hypnotized Denise, we only knew that she and Ed had a close encounter with a UFO in 1982. We didn't even know the year. And just that she thought it was about that time frame. She thought that her daughter was 14. Also, we knew that they had a chunk of missing time, and they had witnesses. to the fact that they had this missing time. So what I had to do is hypnotize Denise and walk her back a little bit at a time through the years so that she would bring back memories. And I always had pleasant memories from 5 years back, from 10 years back, and eventually going back to that time frame. And then we had to go to the incident, and we had to go to that day that it occurred. And we had to go through the entire day. Come to find out, it was a trip that Ed and Denise made every Friday afternoon during the warm months when they lived in Arvada, Colorado. And they would go out to Buena Vista, where they had a travel trailer on a ranch. And Denise's parents also had a travel trailer there. And the family would just meet every Friday evening. They'd have dinner together. Denise's mother always had dinner ready. And they expected them to arrive at about 8:15 in the evening. Well, we went through all of that, and by just helping Denise and facilitating Denise's recall, after I had put her into as deep a trance as possible and given her a safe place to go to, given her permission to cross over into the past at her own rate and when she was comfortable, then we went to that day. We went to all of the information we could get. And finally, through her memory, I was able to find out that it was Friday the 13th of August, 1982. Well, how did I know that that was correct? I wanted to know what the weather was like that day. I had a lot of questions, what they were driving, and that sort of thing. And then I went online, and I checked the date, and sure enough, there was a Friday the 13th, 1982. And then I had to check the weather. Sure enough, the weather was what she said it was. The sunset was what she said it was, that sort of thing. And her husband confirmed that they were driving in the vehicle that she said. So I checked all of these things out, and we went finally into the point where the abduction took place. They'd seen these bright, shiny objects in the sky from the top of not Kebler Pass, that's another pass in Colorado. This was a very high pass that they were coming down over, and onto South Park Valley. It was called Kenosha Pass, a 10,000-foot pass. And as they descended, they saw these bright lights in the sky coming toward them. And once they reached the valley floor, the bright lights came right on top of them. The car lifted up off the road. They remembered that the car had shifted to the side of the road. This was part of their conscious recall. And then out over the desert floor, which was not part of their conscious recall, Denise was then taken from the car and taken up into the craft. And once she was on the craft, she described that to me. But with forensic hypnosis, I don't ask for her to, I don't ask leading questions. I would say, do you remember seeing anything inside the craft? And she would say yes, and I'd say, well, what do you recall? Just tell me what you can describe, and only what you remember, what is a real memory, not what you dreamed, not what you've read, not what you've seen on television, only that which is a real memory. So she told me all of that, and then she's walking down the hallway, and she sees someone waiting for her at the door to the examining room, and she becomes terrified. And she goes, I don't want to do this. And that's when I said, would you like to for me to wake you up now. Would you like to go to your safe place? It's up to you. Because all hypnosis is really self-hypnosis. I'm only the facilitator. I'm speaking to her subconscious mind. But she's in control. Anyone under hypnosis is in control. She said yes, she did. And so I took her back, brought her up out of hypnosis, told her that if she was experiencing any anxiety, that she ought to get in touch with me right away, that we would talk about it. And also told her that when she was ready to go back to that point, to let me know, and we'd facilitate her memory again. So that was the start of it. We had several sessions, and that is what I wrote about, and Denise contributed to it as well in our book, The Alien Abduction Files, the most startling cases of human-alien contact ever reported. Any other questions?
Yeah, one thing about hypnosis that kind of confuses me, I don't know if you're the best hypnosis expert to talk about this, because this has more to do with those hypnotists who put people on stage and they kick off stage the people they can't hypnotize. Speaking of not being able to hypnotize people, some hypnotists, such as Tom DeLuca, I remember seeing him do a hypnotist show at a summer study program I took part at Penn State University in the summer of 2003. He got people on stage, but he did not ask the people, act like you want to be hypnotized. But in my senior year post-prom party in high school, there was a hypnotist who performed for us, and he did a good job in his show. Problem is, before the show, he said, come up here with a mentality that you want to be hypnotized. Now, I guess most people would say that Tom DeLuca is the better hypnotist simply because he doesn't have to tell people, act like you want to be hypnotized. He doesn't tell them that. So do you have any idea why some hypnotists would need to say that and others wouldn't?
Well, let me tell you, for one thing, about 70% of people can be hypnotized. Some people cannot be. And one of the factors is whether or not you're willing to focus and attend upon the hypnotist's words, whether you're willing to take suggestions. So if he said, come up and act like you want to be hypnotized, then you would go up there being willing to be hypnotized, whereas being resistant. I would think that might be why he said that. Of course, only he could answer that question for certain.
Right. Okay, thanks for talking about hypnotists. Let's get to the more interesting stuff. I guess most people would say this is the more interesting stuff, the stuff about ET contact and UFO abductions. First of all, the book Science Was Wrong. Now, the subject of science being wrong, now that's something I take very seriously on this Nature of Reality show. I see Stan Friedman was a co-author. I did have him on my show. It's definitely a show people should listen to. In the first hour, he all but proves that there is a government ET cover-up, and also let him talk about Roswell from a standpoint of evidence that you can prove and easily make deductions from. But in regard, why is the book called Science Was Wrong, and what kind of science did you and Stanton show was wrong? Talk about that subject, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, the original title of our book is It's Impossible, Isn't It? Because we were writing essentially about some highly intelligent, very powerful, politically connected scientists who had made proclamations of impossibility. And in the end, they ended up being wrong. But there were often consequences, and sometimes people died. Many people were hurt, injured. Other scientists were hurt because of the proclamations that these powerful scientists had made. So it's not that science was wrong. It's that these particular politically connected scientists were wrong, but debunked other scientists and, delayed progress.
Okay. One thing that I think is worth talking about for the sake of entertaining radio show conversation, one of those things that I said I disagree with Stanton, and this actually is a subject about science being wrong. Stanton, because he likes nuclear physics, he always has said that all stars are powered by nuclear fusion, I did address this with him when I had him on my show, and I told him, you're actually believing one of the biggest misconceptions in all of science, and apparently so were a lot of the other presenters at that MUFON symposium, because a lot of them were talking about how star planets have to be in the Goldilocks zone to have life, and also they were talking about the Drake equation. Well, I assert the Drake equation is flawed. It's very conservative, and anybody who talks about the Goldilocks zone being factored into supporting life is also being too conservative, because first of all, stars are not powered by nuclear fusion. They are electromagnetic. To be specific, they are hotspots on a universal web of electromagnetic energy that you can't see the web that's throughout the universe because it's outside the frequency of visible light, but it is there. And you can think of planets as cold spots on this web of electromagnetic energy. By the way, I did talk about this with John Lear in my interview with him, and he did give his insider NASA source who provided him with this information and all that every planet, regardless of its size or location from a star, can support life because it works in conjunction with the electromagnetic stars and the universal web of electromagnetic energy and the energy from the sun. The stars and the sun do not generate heat. As the theory goes, they actually transfer the energy to the planets, the electromagnetic energy to the planets, and the planets, the atmosphere, and their filtering system convert the energy into a form that can allow for life to exist on the planet. And I have said many times on my show, this can explain how the Anunnaki from Nibiru that Zachariah Sitchin talked about. Stanton remembers Zachariah well because they were colleagues. They presented at the same conferences. But I have explained on my show, Zachariah Sitchin was right about Nibiru and the Anunnaki and genetically engineering humans. For the sake of time, I'm not going to talk about it on this show, but this can explain how they can survive on Nibiru. And also there's life everywhere. And I did talk to Stanton about this, and I told him, hey, no reason to be discredited or disturbed. If you accept this theory, it would allow for life to exist everywhere in the universe. It only adds to the credibility of ETs existing everywhere and coming on Earth. And also I told him this can explain how the corona is so much hotter than the surface of the star, because stars get their energy from the outside and not through the inside through nuclear fusion. And Stan basically told me, well, that this is very interesting, but as of now, I'm not yet ready to give up the nuclear fusion idea just yet. So now that I brought this to your attention, do you think maybe this is something to take a little bit more seriously? Can you possibly accept this as true?
Well, I've been reading a little bit recently about new theories in theoretical physics, and I'm certainly not a physicist. Stanton Friedman is a physicist. He has a master's degree in physics from the University of Chicago. He worked in private industry for 14 years working on nuclear propulsion systems for space travel, and he certainly knows what he's talking about in terms of the theory that he learned. I really can't address personally who's right and who's wrong. It's all theoretical at this point anyway. So that's my comment. But I have a great deal of respect for Stanton Friedman.
Yeah, and speaking of Stanton, I guess I'll talk about that other thing, and this may tie into the Betty and Barney Hill stuff, possibly because of the location of the ETs. When I had Stan on my show, I did give him the opportunity to talk about what he believes about Bob Lazar. I don't agree with Stan on this. I do believe Bob Lazar is genuine. I saw his his presentation, which can be seen on the UFO TV YouTube channel. There was nothing in terms of body language that suggested he was being a fraud. He seems very honest, sincere, and everything about what he was talking about. And but Stan, of course, asserts Bob couldn't have been where he said he was, and also the element 115 that Bob Lazar talks about, it has a half-life that's too short. It would decay in a heartbeat before the ETs could do anything with it. But when I had John Lear on my show, I gave him the chance to give his side to the story. And you know what the first thing he did? The first thing he did was attack the messenger, and what you just said a few minutes ago kind of flies in the face of what John said. You know what John said? He said, first of all, Stan is always saying he's a nuclear physicist. He does have a degree in nuclear physics, but he's never actually had a job in nuclear physics. And then he said, okay, because apparently you just debunked that. I wonder why John was.
Years.
Okay, maybe for whatever reason, John Lear doesn't think that the specific thing Stanton did when he was working in nuclear propulsion actually deals with nuclear physics, but I guess you've proven him wrong there. But then, you know what else John said? He said Stanton is failing to take into account the fact that element 115 has many different isotopes, and, well, not many, but a few others besides just the the one that we would think of on the periodic table, and the isotopes of the type that Bob Lazar has worked with, they come from a solar system that's much bigger than ours, and the fact that the solar system is much bigger than ours allows for that atom of element 115 to exist longer, and also when it's turned into element 116 by being bombarded with particles to increase the proton count by 1 to 116 protons, and then it decays to 115, and that's how it can bend and warp space-time, as the theory goes. And John said that the element 115 that Bob talks about is an isotope from a much bigger solar system, and that's how it can survive and without decaying. Do you have any comments on John's claim to debunk Stanton?
Well, first of all, let me say that Stanton Friedman is a nuclear physicist. He worked at GE, GM, Westinghouse, TRW Systems, Aerojet General Nucleonics, and McDonnell Douglas as a nuclear physicist on propulsion systems for space travel. So in addition to that, possibly ETs have found a way to harness element 15 and to expand the half-life. I don't know. Again, I'm not a physicist. But I do want to say that Stan did investigate Bob Lazar. Where he started was with Bob's education. And I have to say that some people exaggerate about their education. Maybe they're not lying or about their story, but maybe they have lied about their education in order to impress others. Well, the problem with that is when someone finds out that part of your story is a lie, they won't give you a chance, and they will automatically assume that your entire story is a lie. I found individuals who have exaggerated in the past who I'm absolutely convinced have had real abduction experiences based upon the evidence. But there was some exaggeration, and I'm not going to discuss who this is because I keep that information confidential. Stan is a physicist. I was a social worker and an educator, so I'm more of coming from the position of caring about individuals. That's just what I am and what I've done. When it comes to people, I don't have that hard line attitude. But as a scientist, Stan checked out Bob Lazar's high school. He talked to the guidance counselor there, or it was either the secretary of the guidance counselor. He asked when Bob had graduated, and she happened to mention that he graduated later than his class. And so then Stan said, well, he did graduate near the top of his class, didn't he? And she said, well, no. He ended up graduating in the lower third of his class. Well, you know that if you graduate in the lower third of your class, you're not going to be admitted to MIT. And he found out that when Bob claimed to be a student at MIT, he was actually a student at a junior college in California. So Stan has made the statements he has made based upon his discovery that this information is incorrect. And Stan knows that he had the correct high school and the correct Bob Lazar because he asked Lazar himself. And Lazar gave him the information about where he graduated from. So, Stan only said, okay, this evidence does not hold up. You're saying that you have a doctorate from MIT. You went to this junior college in California. So I'm not going to believe any of the rest of your story because you lied about this. How do I know that you're telling about the truth about anything else? And so that's where Friedman comes from, in his opinion.
Yeah, and when I did have ancient astronaut theorist Jason Martell on my show, he did say that he thinks Stanton has a conflict of interest with Bob Lazar, but he did not elaborate on why he believes that, and I don't really think it's worth talking about that any further on on this show. Although I will say it's not out of the question that people in government would actually contact people that would have known Bob Lazar and said, now you keep your mouth shut about knowing Bob Lazar. You act like you didn't know him. If you act like you knew who Bob Lazar was, we're going to murder you and your wife and kids. Is that understood? The government is that evil. They would do stuff like that, and I'm not suggesting that that's what they did to the people that stand in question, and that's why they lied about Bob Lazar. But you know what? Seeing the kind of stuff the government does, I'm not going to whirl out the possibility that they did that. But moving on to a more lighter subject, Betty and Barney Hill. You're an expert on this, of course, because your aunt and uncle were Betty and Barney Hill. And I guess I'll let you preach to the choir. This would be preaching to the choir to all the UFO experts out there. But, hey, for the people that don't know about it, I guess we could talk about it in detail. So tell us about the Betty and Barney Hill story. And then I'd like to give my take on the whole Zeta Reticuli subject, because I have a few things to say about that.
Okay, well, I'll give you a brief overview of what happened to them for anyone in the audience who is not familiar with the story. Betty and Barney Hill were a racially mixed couple living in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. This happened on September 19, 1961. Betty was a social worker for the state. Barney worked for the post office. Betty had a week's vacation, and Barney decided to surprise her by giving her a trip to Niagara Falls, a place she hadn't been to. I had been there a month before with my aunt and uncle, Betty's sister, and had a wonderful time. We had the family photographs, and Betty and Barney enjoyed looking at them, and Betty said, oh, how she would love to go to Niagara Falls because she'd never been. And so Barney, on his way to work on a Friday evening, decided to ask for a few days off so that he could surprise her with this trip. He went home and they started preparing. They left and went to Niagara Falls, enjoyed themselves there for a day, crossed over into Canada, and from there they drove along Lake Ontario and spent the night in Ontario, very close to Quebec. The next day, they got up. They were very well rested. They had a very good breakfast and went on to Montreal and spent the day sightseeing in Montreal. They were about 110 miles from Montreal. And they had intended to spend the night in Montreal too. But then on the sort of the spur of the moment, Barney decided that he just wanted to go home. There was a hurricane coming up the coast. It would be best if they could get home ASAP to put in their lawn furniture and do the kinds of things that everybody needs to do when there's a hurricane coming. And so he was well rested. He wasn't tired. And so they headed out of Montreal toward New Hampshire. It was not that long a trip to get home. It would have been, I believe, about 6 hours. So they were planning on arriving in Portsmouth at about 2 o'clock in the morning. They drove through Quebec. They thought, well, if they grew tired, they would stop at a hotel, but they didn't. And as they entered New Hampshire, they had a little snack and then were driving on when Betty spotted a new light in the sky. Starry night. There was a waxing gibbous moon that was 3/4 full, and they were just enjoying the drive. Barney would occasionally turn the headlights off so that they could just see how pretty it was as they were driving along, and then turn them back on again. No, there was no one else on the road back in those days. It was the off season in New Hampshire. The tourist season had ended, and the leaf peepers hadn't come up yet. So they're driving along. Betty sees this light, and it's growing larger and larger in the sky. And finally, it grew so large that she asked Barney to stop the car so she could get a better look at this. He stopped the car just south of Twin Mountain, and they got out. They took a look at this thing. It was moving in kind of an unconventional pattern, but Barney was a confirmed skeptic. He didn't believe in UFOs. Betty wasn't questioning if it was a UFO at that point. She was thinking that maybe she was seeing her first satellite. My family was interested in watching satellites. We were very interested in Sputnik, and my grandfather and I and my brother would go out nights and look into the sky to see satellites. So this craft at this point shifted direction and bounced back very quickly toward Barney. And at that point, he realized there was something wrong there. It didn't seem like it was a conventional aircraft. But he got into the car telling Betty that it was, and they headed south. And they entered Franconia Notch, which is a beautiful scenic area in New Hampshire. It's a notch that cuts through the mountains. There's a ski area there. The Old Man of the Mountain, which was New Hampshire's symbol, state symbol, was there. It fell off the mountain in 2003. But they stopped again at the Old Man of the Mountain. They got out, and the craft was at that point right beside the old man's profile, which was 48 feet from forehead to chin, and the craft was at least 1.5 to 2 times the length of the old man's profile. And it appeared to be spinning. You'd see the blip, blip, blip as it moved. They watched it for a while. It started moving. It was bouncing back and forth. It was moving in a stair-step kind of pattern. They got back into the car and headed south. Barney wanted to get home. That was his main objective, is, okay, let's get home before I get tired. So they're driving south. They exit Franconia Notch. Betty's growing excited now because this craft is coming in quite close. And she's telling Barney, stop, find a place to stop, get a look at this again. And Barney really wanted to at that point. So he's looking for a place to stop. And before he can find a spot, this craft shifts ahead and stops over the car. It's just to the right of the car, and Barney has to stop the car in the center of the highway. And the craft comes and starts to descend. It stops about 200 feet above the car. He gets out and he looks up at it, still trying to identify this thing. He can't believe that it could be a UFO. It has to be something that he can identify. So he's looking at it through binoculars. He and Betty both see a row of windows on this disc-shaped craft that he described as looking like a huge pancake. It's silent. There are blue lights shining, sort of a bluish-white light out from behind these windows. And as he's looking at the craft, it again shifts location to an adjacent field. This is like a farmer's apple field. There's a farm stand there, and he walks out into the field to get a better look at this craft. And it's now descending even lower. It's come to within about 100 feet of him, he estimates. He puts the binoculars to his eyes, and he sees figures looking back at him. He can see them from the tops of their heads all the way down to below their knees. And all of a sudden, all but one move from their position at the windows to what appears to be a panel on this corridor that's encircling this section of the craft. And their arms go up, and when their arms go up, the craft tilts toward Barney's direction. Some lights start to slide out of each side of this craft, and something starts to drop out of the bottom. And this leader is somehow conveying a message to Barney just to stay there and keep looking. And, of course, that's the last thing that Barney's going to do is stay there and keep looking. He immediately feels that there is a plan in progress, and that plan is to capture him. And he wants to get out of there as fast as he possibly can. He pulls the binocular straps from his eyes, breaking the strap in the process, runs back to the car screaming to Betty that they have to get out of there or they're going to be captured. At that point, as he's getting into the car, he sees that this craft is again changing location, and it's coming right over the top of the vehicle. He tells Betty to roll down the window and look up to see if she can see the craft as he's speeding down the highway at this point. She does that. She's expecting to see lights. She didn't see lights. All she saw was blackness. She didn't even see the stars or the moon. And she rolled the window back up, didn't think the craft was there at that point, and all of a sudden, she and Barney hear a series of code-like buzzing sounds that are striking the trunk of the vehicle. They cause the car to vibrate and cause a tingling sensation to pass through Betty's and Barney's bodies. That same kind of tingling sensation is something that's reported to me over and over again by experiencers when they're taken. Now, the next thing that Betty and Barney know, they're 35 miles down the road. They have very little memory for what had happened in the interim, but they do remember observing a fiery orb. They do remember encountering a roadblock somewhere along the way, and they do remember that they're hearing a second series of these buzzing sounds striking the trunk of the car again, but they don't see the UFO. And Barney tries to make that sound. He's moving the car from one side of the road to the other, trying to find a prosaic explanation for what is happening here. They drive on home. They feel like they want some human contact. There's nothing open at that time of night. They drive back to their home in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and then they realize that something is very wrong. They're later than they had anticipated. Betty's dress is torn in several locations. The tops of Barney's shoes are so deeply scraped he has to buy new shoes. There are shiny spots on the trunk of the car that cause a compass needle to spin and spin, indicating a magnetic field around the trunk of the car where they had heard these buzzing sounds. Things are not the way they should have been, but they have no memory of or almost no memory of what happened during that 2-hour period of missing time. And they just let it go. Betty and Barney make a report to the Air Force. They make a report to the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. Walter Webb, an astronomer from the Hayden Planetarium who works for NICAP as a volunteer, comes up, interviews Betty and Barney for 6 hours separately and then together. He makes his report, and that's about the end of it for a while. Walter had never investigated an abduction before. He had no idea what was going on. He told me that if he had known what this was going to end up being, he would have paid a whole lot more attention to it than what he did initially. But no one had been abducted before this in the United States, as far as we knew. And so that was that. Betty and Barney said to Betty, just don't tell anyone about this. No good can come of it. She told the family. She called my mother up. I was in the room. I was 13 years old when the call came in. And we were all sworn to secrecy because of Betty's and Barney's positions in the community, in their jobs. Certainly, we didn't want our family to seem eccentric or, like a couple of nuts. And so we kept that secret. But in 1965, this is after Betty and Barney had gone to Dr. Benjamin Simon, that secret was made public as the result of a violation of confidentiality. And let me back up to the reason that they ended up going to Dr. Benjamin Simon. Barney was greatly troubled by what had happened to him, by the little bit of memory that he had. He was the one who actually was looking up at these non-humans, who felt threatened by them, who felt that he was going to be captured if he didn't get away. And now he was well aware that he was missing time. And there was evidence on Betty's dress, on his shoes, on other things that he just couldn't explain. And this was very troubling to him. He developed a bleeding ulcer. He started to drink to, try to wipe out these memories. He wasn't able to sleep anymore. He was just having all kinds of symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder brought on by this. And so since his symptoms would not recede with traditional medical treatment, he decided to see a psychiatrist, first locally. And then he had the referral to Dr. Simon, who used deep trance hypnosis to resolve these types of problems. It would mean a long drive every Saturday for 6 months for Betty and Barney, and the cost of thousands of dollars out of their pockets to see this psychiatrist. But they did it. They saw him separately for a period of 6 months, and he was able to help them to resolve, especially the problems that Barney was having. He was the primary patient. He was under hypnoanalysis with Dr. Simon. Betty just had hypnotherapy. So that's how it happened. They found out under hypnosis, separately, that they had been abducted, that they had been taken on board the craft. They'd had physical examinations of a very unusual type. The ETs were very interested in their skeletal structure, in their skin, their joints, their nervous system, and also extracted reproductive material from Betty through a needle in her navel, from Barney by placing a cup over his genitals. And they were examined separately. So during Barney's examination, it gave Betty the opportunity to talk with the leader. Initially, she was terrified, but by that time, he had taken away the terrible pain she experienced when the needle was plunged into her navel to extract. We assume that we know nowadays that that's what they're doing. He took away her pain. So then she said to him, "Well, I know you're not from around here. Where's your home port?" And so he produced this 3-dimensional image of a star map. Some of the stars on it were the size of a nickel. Some of them were only pinpoints, and they were connected by lines. Some of them were solid lines. There were 6 solid lines going between those 2 nickel-sized stars. And then there was a solid line going up to, now through Marjorie Fish's work, we believe, is the sun. And solid lines to some other stars, but dotted lines to others, indicating that they were expeditions. And also Betty saw some alien script symbols on the craft in what was like a large white hard tablet that she opened and looked into. And there actually has been an alien symbol study done now, which is very, very interesting, because the symbols that Betty sketched for me back in the year 2000 are very much like the symbols that other experiencers sketched in this study that was done. So, questions?
Yeah, let's talk about the Zeta Reticuli subject for a moment, because, getting back to Bob Lazar for a moment, he says the ETs that have brought the element 115 and use it, they come from Zeta Reticuli. In my interview with John Lear, he talked about how if you use element 115, it can get to Zeta Reticuli from Earth there and back. Not a round trip, but one-way trip would take about 34 hours to travel the 39 light years that it takes to get from Earth to Zeta Reticuli. And another thing about Zeta Reticuli that's kind of inauspicious, it has been said by some ET contactees like Alex Collier, and I did talk about this with George Kavaslis in my private session with him, when it comes to malevolent aliens influencing life on Earth. Now, let me say there are good aliens too, so no need to freak out people, but in regards to malevolent aliens, there is a hierarchy of sorts. It has been said that at the top, you have the Archons, they call them, but one specific group that's very prominent is reptilian aliens from Alpha Draconis, and below that is a group of gray aliens from Orion, and then below that is a group of gray aliens from Zeta Reticuli. So this makes you wonder, how does that connect with either Bob Lazar and or Betty and Barney Hill, and are there both good and bad gray aliens at Zeta Reticuli? Now that I've talked about this, do you have anything to say about the Zeta Reticuli issue here?
Yes, I do. In fact, the ETs that contacted Betty and Barney were very nice. Because Betty and Barney were terrified at first. This had never happened to anyone before, as far as they knew. They didn't know if they were going to be killed, if they were going to be taken away to some other planet, or what. But the ETs that took them were very comforting. They said to them, don't be afraid. We're not going to harm you. We only have a few simple tests to do, and when we're done, you're going to go about your way. At the end, they said, well, we think that it's best that you don't remember what happened, and that's when they took Betty's evidence away. The leader had told her she could take that book, but the little guards that are in charge of protecting whatever is on the craft, and they work as assistants too, just would not let Betty take that book off the craft. But so the leader apologized. He said, I'm sorry. Betty said to him, I'm not a highly knowledgeable person. And Betty actually was a highly knowledgeable person, had a very high IQ. Barney's IQ was 140. They were quite knowledgeable. But she was talking about scientists. She said, there are scientists here who would like to talk to you if you would be willing to share information with them. And the Zeta said to Betty, well, that's not my decision to make, but maybe that's possible. And so Betty said, well, how would you find me? And he said, we can always find those that we want to find, which is very interesting to me because back in 1961 he said that. And so, it lead me to indicate to me that they probably received an implant back then so that they could be tracked and found again, just the way the rest of us are today. But so, it appears if Marjorie Fish's work, we know that her work was accurate back then. There were scientists who vetted her work for accuracy, and she went to an extraordinary effort to do that work. In all, she built 26 models of our local galactic neighborhood. She thought she was going to find many matches. In the end, she found only one, and she still didn't have it in 1971. She started that effort after she read The Interrupted Journey. This is the first book that was written on the topic by John G. Fuller, and Betty Starmap was in that book. Marjorie saw it. She was a member of Mensa, the school teacher in Ohio, and she started going to the university, and she couldn't check the catalogs out. She had to go to the university and sit in the astronomy department, use their catalogs, and hand copy all of the distance data. Then, no computers back then. She had to take that home, do the mathematical calculations to know exactly where to place every one of those stars in its proper location in this three-dimensional model that she made using monofilament line and beads of different colors and sizes. So you can just imagine the extraordinary effort that she put into this. And to have created 26 of these, the largest one had 256 stars in their proper location, three-dimensional location. Today it's a snap. You just use the computer. Back then it was incredibly time-consuming. And finally, in 1972, a new Gleason catalog, astronomical catalog, was released, and there was a change in some of that distance data. She changed the star's location in the model, and when she changed those three stars, she had a perfect match for Betty's star map. And so, here we have Zeta Reticuli 1, Zeta Reticuli 2. They are about the same size as our sun. They're about the same intensity and density as our sun. They're made up of many of the same elements that we believe our sun is made up from. So, there's pretty good reason to suspect that there might be life out there. It might be possible. Some people have said, oh, no, it's a binary star. It would be impossible for planets to be in a stable orbit around those stars. But then there are astronomers who have said that's just simply not true. They're far enough apart that those planets, if they're there, could be in a stable orbit. And we know that many, many stars have planets that our astronomers never dreamed were there. So I'm just waiting for the day when we send a probe out in that direction, when we can acquire more information about that. One was supposed to be going out, I believe it was in 2014, but then it was canceled. There was another one that was slated for 2017. I don't even know what the status of that is at that point, unless our government just thinks there would be too much hoopla about sending a probe out toward Zeta Reticuli because so many people are interested in knowing whether or not there is life there. They certainly don't seem to be very interested or in favor of letting the population of the Earth know that we're being visited.
Okay, and let's talk about how the ETs get from point A to point B. Like I did mention, Bob Lazar asserts element 115 bombarded with particles to make it element 116, one additional proton. When it decays, it will bring I said bend and warp space-time. I should more specifically say it brings space-time towards you, and then by bringing it towards you, you can travel, so to speak, You're traveling by bringing space-time towards you to go a great distance in a short period of time. But there are other means of aliens traveling around the cosmos. In my interview with Stanton, he talked about how magnetohydraulic propulsion is used. Of course, the problem with magnetohydraulic propulsion, there's the speed of light issue. It'll take a while to get to star systems that are very far off, although, as Stanton did talk about in an interview with Giorgio Tsoukalos he did on that new TV show that Giorgio Tsoukalos was the star of that was on the History Channel. He talked about how as you get closer and closer to the speed of light, you do travel into the future at a faster rate. So that does help a little bit in that regard. So the faster you go to the speed of light you get into the future, you will age slower. So that does also help. But that doesn't really solve the problem of great distances. Of course, when you factor into Bob Lazar's element 115, that can certainly help solve that problem. Also, the idea of wormholes. And then there's by far the most far out theory about how aliens get from point A to point B. First of all, quantum entanglement, spooky action at a distance, where two atoms that are intertwined through quantum entanglement, if you put them at opposite ends of the universe, the moment you vibrate one, the other one will instantly vibrate. And that shows that information can travel faster than light. Mainstream science says that they don't know why that works, but more and more people that are not in mainstream science are asserting that the reason that works is because space and time are actually illusions. And the fact that space and time are illusions means that there is no distance between the two particles, which means that there's no problem, no trouble for the information to travel from one to the other to cause instantaneous vibration of the atoms. And it has been said by some that ETs have harnessed this, have exploited, so to speak, the fact that space-time are illusions to perform quantum entanglement on a more macroscopic scale to get an alien or even a UFO craft from point A to point B. So I'll give you the chance to talk about your ideas on all these, magneto-hydraulic propulsion and also bending and warping space-time, wormholes, and quantum entanglement on a macroscopic scale. You can talk all about all those things. You got the floor on this.
Okay, well, maybe all of those things are being used depending upon the level of technological development of that space society that is traveling through space. Certainly when we travel into space today, we are using science and technology that it looks pretty primitive to, say, the Zetas who are coming here. The Zetas have told many experiencers that they do not perceive space and time the way we do. We perceive it in a linear way. They say that is not the way that it works. Also, they are able to change the vibrational frequency of their bodies so that they are no longer solid matter. We see this when they pass through walls, for example. And this is something that I was very curious about. I wanted to know if it was theoretically possible. So I spoke to some theoretical physicists about it. And they explained to me how it is possible. And they also said that we had actually done it on a very small scale in a laboratory, that what we do is they would have to actually alter their vibrational frequency, the vibrational frequency of a wall, which would be vibrating at a lower frequency than the human body or the ET body. And so that all of these frequencies would have to be about the same or the same. Remember that 99.9% of the atom is empty space between the protons and the electrons. So if you can match up this frequency and phase, then you can pass a solid object or a body through a wall. The atoms interpenetrate, in other words. Now, if they can do that to get through walls, they must be able to do that to travel through space. What's to say they're not traveling at the speed of thought to get here, to arrive here? We know that over and over again, individuals who see these craft sort of see them materialize in front of their eyes, that they might not be solid initially, but then they become solid objects. We know that the ETs often are not seen as solid, but then they become solid as the individual is looking at them. So I think that holds a key to how they travel here. And their science and technology is so much farther advanced than ours that it all looks like magic to us, that's for sure.
Okay, one final thing about Stan, just because this makes for great radio show conversation. Stan and I do beg to differ in regards to the extent to which the military controls UFOs. Stan says, well, yeah, the military may recover crashed craft and all that, but I am not of the opinion that most of the UFOs out there are actually controlled by the military, and his defense to back up his assertion is if the military controlled UFOs, they would have used it in the wars, and they didn't use it in the wars. I talked to John Lear, Bill Burns, and John Ventry about this, And they all asserted the reason we didn't use UFO technology in the wars is because we did not have to. Because when it comes to winning wars, just use technology that's better than your opponent's technology. And we had more down-to-earth, less sophisticated technology to go around that involved watercraft and airplanes, but not UFOs, which would have been more than sufficient for any given side to have won the war. And you also need to understand all the wars throughout history were manipulated. The same powers that be were controlling both sides of the war to get the outcome they wanted. So I can certainly imagine that if any one specific side wanted to use UFO technology in the war, the powers that be would instantly stop the military and tell them, you're not going to use UFO technology in this war that we're controlling. We don't want you to get the upper hand. And even if they wanted people that had UFO technology to get the other hand, they wouldn't have to use it, well, because they have other, like I said, less sophisticated technology to go around. So in regards to this whole issue of the military controlling or not controlling UFOs and whether or not they would have used them in the wars, what do you have to say about that?
I have talked to a former military officer who was the officer who took the UFO reports on base. And he said to me that I would be surprised at how connected the military is to these extraterrestrials, that there's more of a connection there than I could ever imagine. I don't know if he was lying to me or not. He just told me that's what he told me. He would not permit me to use his name. He would not permit me to take a sworn statement from him and keep it in a safe deposit box until after he died, because he said that his loyalty to his family, his fellow soldiers, and his military was such that he would never do that. But I swear on a Bible that he said this to me. So would we, if we have the ET technology, which we most likely do have some of it, would we back engineer it? Certainly, we would back engineer whatever we could. Can we back engineer all of it? No, we can't, because we can only back engineer what we can understand scientifically. Think of Christopher Columbus trying to back engineer a GPS system. Couldn't do it. Didn't have the understanding, didn't have the tools. You have to scientifically be at a certain point in order to be able to do this. Certainly, we are told, I've been told many times, that we are much farther ahead in our technological development than any of us realize. But this is held back, and probably would only be used if needed in a dire emergency. But you can't tell your friends without telling your enemies, and certainly there is a lot of espionage going on, a lot of spying, and so there are certain secrets. They're compartmentalized with a need-to-know access only. You can't go from department to department, and that's the way secrets are kept. It's very, very important for us to keep these secrets, because if we don't, then we'll be conquered by whoever we give those secrets to. So in terms of our own protection, our own national security, these secrets have to be kept. That's about all I have to say on that.
Well, I heard you mention national security. You have to understand, any government that tells you we're doing this in the name of national security, it's all a brainwashing tactic. Although when it comes to the ET idea, I could imagine the governments, as tyrannical as they are, would realize, well, we're not going to disclose ET and UFO information, because if we do, then there's going to be chaos in the streets, and it's going to be another Orson Welles radio show broadcast all over again. I mean, some people would beg to differ on that one, but I can certainly imagine the government would not do that for that simple fact. Because what? Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but the government, that might be one of many reasons. But as far as I'm concerned, the major reason for this is that we can't stop it. If we tell the population that we have extraterrestrials living among us, only underground or up in the atmosphere, and they can come at will. They can abduct as many human beings as they want. They can subject us to whatever experiments they want. How would the Earth's population accept that? If every government in the world said, sorry, folks, we're helpless. There's nothing we can do to stop this or to help you. I think that's the key to why we're not being told.
Right, and we have to understand we're not officially being told. Like when I had Stephen Bissett on my show, he says, well, I fully understand that whistleblowers, conspiracy theorists, and investigative journalists have exposed pretty much every government secret out there, and also every government secret in regards to UFOs and aliens. But I also understand that as long as the governments and the mainstream media don't officially acknowledge it, then it will not truly become official. And you also have to take into account that humans, by nature, many of them are paradigmatic, fearful, and stupid, and will refuse to believe the truth if they can't handle the truth. And that is another key reason why it's so easy for governments to get away with their secrets being exposed. Since I've brought that up, do you have anything to say about that comment? I didn't like calling humans paradigmatic, fearful, and stupid, but hey, it's a fact of life, and I have to raise people about that because that's one of the key reasons why all the truth is not getting out and people aren't accepting it. So what do you have to say about all that?
Well, some people are in denial because it feels good to be in denial. You can be comfortable if your life revolves around sports and around your church and around your family, and you don't have to think about things that feel uncomfortable. So, it's true that many people are fearful and that people like to stay at their comfort level. I respect that. I'm not trying to jam this down anybody's throat. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I have respect for other people and for their opinions and for their personal feelings, for their comfort level. I speak to those who know what's going on and who want to learn more. That's who I speak for. And
yeah, it's people like you and me who get that information out to help people wake up. All right, let's get into some really good stuff here. Alien abductions. One thing I do want to point out, talked about this with many of my previous guests, most notably Alfred Weber and Mary Rodwell, about how many crystal children, indigo children, star children are being abducted, so to speak. But I put the word abducted in quotation marks because the aliens that are abducting them are actually benevolent extraterrestrials that are actually informing and possibly in some cases implanting information in the DNA of the star children to talk about how around the year 2017 we're set for a major consciousness shift where humanity will have love on a more massive scale and things will be much more different than the prison planet that we're currently in. And Alfred Weber had some very inauspicious things to say about this. He told me that the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster is in fact a global extinction event, but the good news, however, is that we are in a positive timeline at the moment, and those good ETs, they're actually going to help us have this consciousness shift. And also, as some of my other guests like Ray Kusalanich talked about, they're actually going to show themselves in 2017 around that time frame. And a lot of people would hear this and say, well, are they out of their minds, the human race? There's going to be chaos in the streets. It's going to be Orson Welles radio broadcast all over the place. Well, no, they assert, because the consciousness shift is speeding up at a high rate in order to, among other things, keep us safe from the Fukushima extinction event. So that's probably the most far-out thing involving alien abductions going on in the modern day. But I'd like to give you the floor to talk about what you know about alien abductions and what you talk about in your book that you wrote with Denise Stoner. And you got the floor on this, and also give me your take on this stuff I just said.
Well, first of all, not all ET contact is an abduction. And a lot of people that I've worked with initially felt that they were being abducted. But over time, they have developed more and more conscious recall. They have learned how to drop that fear. I know it's a terrible thing when you're being taken and all of a sudden there are intruders in your room. You might feel their fingers on your body. That's a really creepy feeling. Your body is up in the air, and you're then being taken very rapidly out of your bed or out of your car initially. You don't have that many out of cars nowadays, but into this alien environment. So the fear factor, I think, is what often causes people to feel that they're being abducted. But then, over time, the ETs can almost be like members of the family. They will say, you're our family. We love you, and they will begin to impart information to experiencers. The Greys are some. The Tall Whites are some who do this. The insectoids, not as much, but they've imparted information about the interior of the craft's propulsion system. Not all propulsion systems are the same. That there is sort of like a collective consciousness among these crafts of this particular type, and that they're biomechanical, that there's actually a consciousness there. So every craft is aware of where every other craft is, and that the ETs also have this collective consciousness. Not that it's a hive mentality. It isn't. It is a collective consciousness, but there is free will within that. So the collective consciousness is sort of a great empathy toward one another, a sense of feeling the other's emotions. And when you do that, you would never want to go to war. You would never want to hurt that other individual because you can feel whatever they feel. It's that sort of thing. And the ETs have told many people that is what they're trying to lead humans toward in this sort of evolutionary shift in human consciousness that they hope that we will achieve at some point. And yes, these star children, I have met a few individuals who appear to, I don't know how to say this, but they're part hybrid, I believe. They have special gifts, and they are the children of experiencers. It's generational. They don't just pluck one person here and one person there. My research indicates that much of this is generational. If your parents were taken, then you're taken, your children, your grandchildren, and so on down the line. But there is sort of a familial bond there as well with the ETs, where communication is established, where the children who have some of this ET DNA appear to have special gifts, such as telepathy, such as being highly psychic. Now, most individuals who took part in the Marden-Stoner commonalities study among experiencers in the year 2012, this was a social science study, 45 questions on a questionnaire, 50 experiencers that we interviewed, and they completed the questionnaire. We had a 25-person control group, and 88% had increased psychic ability or intuitive ability after they had contact with these extraterrestrials. Some of them had learned to heal. More than 50% had either been healed by the ETs or had been given the gift of healing, whereas at least temporarily they were able to heal others. And this is something that we researchers are tracking. You can't say that these entities are negative or evil when they're healing the people that they're working with, the humans. They've healed people of cancer. So this is an extraordinary gift. And, certainly there are some negative ones. We hear about the negative ones as well. Some reptilians, but I've also heard very positive things about reptilians. I've never met a reptilian myself, but they seem to go both ways. The insectoid types, they seem very, very intense. They often serve as doctors on the craft. They often work with the Greys as well, where the Grey might end up being the escort, the person that the human has contact with throughout their lifetime. They see this escort over and over again. They establish a relationship with this escort. But sometimes it's the insectoid who is the doctor on the craft. And sometimes we just see the Greys and the taller Greys, and then the small Greys who are the guards, who stand against the wall and move only when they're told to be moved or to move. And they're the ones who are also the assistants. So if your clothing is removed, then they might help to take it off, or they might help to put it back on you. And oftentimes they don't seem to be highly intelligent because they make a lot of mistakes. They'll dress people in the wrong clothing. I had one experiencer that I've been working with, been investigating his case for 2 years now. He was taken one night. He was wide awake reading a newspaper when this happened. It was very early in the morning, and he was wearing a T-shirt. It was on right side out, forward. It was very uncomfortable if it was on backwards. The next thing he knew, a couple of hours had passed, and his T-shirt was now on inside out and backwards, very uncomfortable, soaking wet, as if he had been in a sweat. He was very, very shaky. He had some marks on his body as if he had undergone some kind of surgery. And, so I asked him to take that T-shirt and to put it into a paper bag and put it into his closet for a couple of weeks and let me know if he saw anything. Do you know why I asked him that? Any idea?
No, I don't. Tell us.
Okay. That's because my Aunt Betty put her dress into her closet when she arrived home after being taken. And the next time she took the dress out, it was coated with a pink powdery substance. Most people don't know that. But and this experiencer didn't know what I was looking for. But 2 weeks later, he took that T-shirt out and he looked at it, and I said, "Well, what do you see?" And he said, "It's pink. It had been brown, but now it's pink." And so I had him send it to me, and I've sent it off to a laboratory for scientific analysis. And early reports are that it seems to have some of the properties that Betty's dress had. So that is very interesting too. And what causes that? That's the next thing. Is it a substance that they put us in when we're on the craft? Is it some kind of a spray or something that they use in order to disinfect us? What is it? We really don't know. There's a lot that we know, but there's a lot that we don't know as well. Any other questions?
We don't know what we don't. Yeah, sorry, I had to get off mute. We don't know what we don't know, as John Lear once said in that interview he did on that show, Brad Meltzer's Decoded. But then again, we also know a lot because even though a lot of information has been exposed, people just will refuse to believe the truth because they can't handle the truth. By the way, before I continue with this interview, I just want to get one thing out here. Stephen Bissett's petition. It only has around 10,040 signatures at the moment. It's on the White House petition page. It's called Support Congressional Hearings for Government Agency Political Witnesses to Extraterrestrial Related Events and Evidence. I was planning on using Facebook to to try to spread the word about this, but as of now, that's not possible. But believe me, when I get back on Groundhog Day, I'll try to get this information out. But just want to point that out. That's the name of the petition. As many people try to sign that as possible, even if the government will not disclose information, as some assert, it's still worthwhile for the people to try to pressure them through with the White House petitions and also raise awareness about this stuff. But getting back to the alien abduction thing, when people get abducted, so to speak, well, first of all, it's not truly an abduction because people make the case you agreed to this when you made a soul contract before incarnating as a human. You did agree to get abducted, so to speak. So in that sense, it's not an abduction because you agreed to it. But that's a side issue. The point about abductions that I'm really interested in making here is it the body that's being abducted, the actual physical biological body, or is it the soul, or is it in a combination, or in some cases it's one or the other? And if it is one or the other, which aliens would abduct the whole body, which aliens would abduct the soul, and what are their reasons for why they would abduct the body or the soul? Can you perhaps clear up the confusion there?
Well, first of all, let me say that the human body does not fare particularly well being moved into an alien environment. I've been told that, and I believe that it's true because so many experiencers suffer from physiological problems such as chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic fatigue and immune dysfunction syndrome. It's in my study, it was 36% of experiencers as opposed to less than 1% of the general population. So it would be advantageous not to take the human body every time that it has to be taken. So if there is a way to separate the human consciousness from the physical container, then and it would be done for the purpose of communication, I would imagine. It seems to me that it would be better for the human body in terms of doing that, where you don't have to take the atomic structure of the body apart and then reassemble it in the craft. It was much easier on the human body when they just used to take us, open the door, and walk us onto the craft. But they seem not to do that very often, if at all, anymore. So that would be a reason for them to do that. Are those of us who are taken, are we actually ET consciousness? Are we actually the family of these ETs? Who knows?
Well, I can get back to that in a little bit, but did y'all want to say anything else? Because I do want to take a question in the chat room. Anything else?
No.
All right, I get done with that subject, but I'll get back to it in a moment on that very thing. But questions in the chat room here. Why do the aliens have power over us? Because of their technology, or have they been given the go-ahead? And then she asks, but are we some kind of pets to them? I mean, why bother with us? Could you perhaps answer those questions?
Well, yes. Well, there is some evidence that perhaps they were given the go-ahead during the Eisenhower administration to take us, and some researchers have stated that they sort of went overboard and are doing this more than they should have. We're not really. Well, they sort of treat us like favorite pets, you might say, but I don't think we're pets to them. They seem to be studying our DNA, and they said that it's very important for the survival of our species. They're sorry that they have to do this, It's sometimes frightening, but they do the best they can to do this quietly as they can without interfering too much in our lives. They're concerned about the hysteria and much information here. It's very frightening information that is being disseminated, and it's making humans hostile toward them. They have stated this. And when they claim there is really no valid reason for this hostility, that it's based upon falsehood. But they say that they are concerned about the survival of our species, that something is threatening our species, and if we're not careful, it could lead to the disintegration of our species due to changes in the DNA structure that's being caused environmentally. And they, without really interfering, are attempting to propagate our species while they study us. So, perhaps that's the answer, at least to why the Greys are here, what they're doing, or one of the reasons. They probably have many reasons.
All right, one more question in the chat room here. I don't know if you're an expert on this, but chemtrails. I mean, in my interview with Alfred Weber, Alfred talked about how chemtrails do have some mind control abilities to them. They can turn us into more robot-like humans. I'm not really familiar with all the details. You guys would have to check out the interview I had with him on that. It's one of the last things we talked about. But there is also the idea that the chemtrails, they are used to make this world more suitable for the archons, the malevolent aliens. That's what somewhat asserts. So are you know anything about the whole chemtrail issue and their connections to aliens?
No, I do not specialize at all in chemtrails. So my specialization is primarily with gray aliens, but ET contact in general.
Okay.
So I can't comment on that.
Sorry, just had to ask for the sake of the chat room individual, Sean Cohen, who's one of my biggest fans.
I'm not an expert on that.
It's okay. Getting back to alien abductions, you were asking who knows why they're doing it. Well, you've possibly heard that humans are genetic royalty. We are a mixture of many different ET races. I mean, Zecharia Sitchin's story is only part of the equation. That only explains the evolution from Homo erectus into Homo sapien through the combination of human and Anunnaki DNA. In reality, it's a lot deeper. Humans have DNA from many different ET species. Word on the street among ET contactees and ET experts who really dig deep into universal history. Humans originated in the Lyra star system, and there is an article called Characteristics of ET Races on in5d.com, which I did use as a subject for a show that I did by myself. There was a section about Lyra ETs, and I noticed that the Lyra star system had numerous different ET races in it, and I'm thinking, well, that makes perfect sense. That would explain how humans, which came from Lyra, would be genetic royalty. So this idea that the ETs, be them good or bad ETs, are so interested in us is because we are genetic royalty. Do you think maybe that has something to do with it?
Boy, I have to say first that I am a scientific ufologist. I take a pretty conservative approach. I take a social scientist approach to all of this. And so I really can't comment on that.
Okay. I fully understand that. Let's see. Well, I've pretty much covered everything here in regards to your bio. What is there to talk about? I was using that as a guide. But I guess one thing about UFOs that I could bring up and discuss, when it comes to what UFOs are, it is a percentage factor. The majority of the UFOs, according to George Kavaslis and John Lear when I interviewed them, do belong to the military-industrial complex, and all military-industrial complex UFOs have ET connections, John Lear asserted, and again, I did explain why they didn't use them in the wars earlier, so don't bother bringing that issue up again. But that's the majority. There are some that come from other dimensions and some that do come from other planets but are not connected to the military-industrial complex. And there are a few hoaxes, but we're not going to bother talking about the hoaxes because that's not really worth it. But the whole subject of ETs being a percentage factor, like some are military-industrial complex, well, most are, and also some are come from other dimensions and planets, and some are actually not so much ET related as they are created by the consciousness of Mother Earth, and they appear as a UFO-like substance, which isn't really connected to any ETs. It's just consciousness of Mother Earth. So the idea of UFOs being a percentage factor, what do you have to say about that?
Well, I have to tell you that more and more I am receiving reports from individuals who believe they're being abducted, but it doesn't seem to be an abduction that has the characteristics that I'm familiar with after speaking with hundreds of experiencers, being an experiencer, and having that in my family. People talk about this very evil feeling, this being projected upon them, this feeling that there are like snakes that are crawling through their mattresses. The mattresses are moving. They're being grabbed by the ankles and have claw marks on the ankles. They're being held upside down. They're being taunted. And, once you get past the realization that these people are not mentally ill, then you have to go to what is next. And I've been very, very interested in this, and have, I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Eno, but he is a paranormal investigator, has been for many, many years. He studied to be a priest at first, but then was not ordained because his interest in all of this was not something that he was going to do. He was not going to lockstep with the Catholic Church's opinion on all of this. He's highly, highly knowledgeable. And we have been talking about these characteristics and the characteristics of these parasitic entities that seem to latch on to individuals and will do these things to people and can follow generations of individuals with this. I have discovered that, and he told me this, people who are having this tend to have very high electromagnetic fields around where they live. They might have very high electric bills. These parasitic entities seem to draw off the human energy and off the electrical current as well. Very, very interesting to study this kind of thing, because the marks on these individual bodies, their experiences are different than the marks I see on ET, I guess it's ET, experiencers' bodies. And the scenario, the modus operandi seems different to me. On the other side, I'm hearing about what almost seem like angelic beings. I was amazed. I don't know if you're familiar with Nancy Talbot from BLT Research, but she has been working with a man in Europe, and she has her camera over there. This was a crop circle case. She's a crop circle researcher, but her cameras have begun to capture some just jaw-dropping images of what appear to be angels and even the Virgin Mary on film. And, I speak to individuals who wonder if they've been contacted by ETs, but they are angelic. They're so reassuring. When someone has been severely injured, there might be one of these angelic type beings who will come to them, who will comfort them, who will give them knowledge to guide them through and be there with that individual. But sometimes that angelic sort of individual will also have the experiencer have a memory of being on a table, maybe in a craft, definitely in an alien environment, and feel this tingling sort of electrical sensation passing through their body. And this sensation, I hear over and over again, imparts healing to experiencers. So it's all very fascinating to me, and I'm doing more study in that area right now.
Thanks. Just so you know, we have just over 10 minutes left on the show. I'll let you know how much time you have for this, what may be our final subject of the day to discuss. But one thing that I really like to stress whenever I try to convince people, in particular the average layman, that they have no choice but to acknowledge that there are ETs visiting Earth, is because the moon is an artificial body. And if I may take just a moment to back up my statement there. First of all, the same side of the moon always faces the Earth, which implies either A, the moon is rotating at the same speed that it orbits the Earth, or B, and most people do subscribe to this, the moon does not rotate but is somehow fixed in a way to have the same side face us all the time. Second of all, the moon perfectly eclipses the sun. It's just the right place in the sky, place in space, and just the right size in relation to the sun to perfectly eclipse the sun. I mean, what are the odds of that? And what are the odds that the moon would be so big compared to its host planet, which is nothing like what all the other moons are in the solar system? Also, the moon rang like a bell when spacecraft landed on it. NASA does acknowledge that. That suggests that it is hollow, and even more creepy than that. I use the word creepy because a lot of people can't seem to accept this. All the craters on the moon, go down to the same depth, except for the really, really small craters. Regardless of the crater's diameter, they all go down to the same depth, which shows there's got to be some impenetrable and, dare I say it, artificial surface existing below the moon dust. Of course, the average person who hears this would probably say something like, well, I refuse to believe the moon's artificial because I can't handle the truth. It sounds too scary. But, I just explained why. It's relatively easy to explain it the way I see it, and that is why this is my personal favorite way of convincing people that they have no choice but to acknowledge an ET cover-up. And just for kicks, it's been said by some, including ET contactees, that Mars's moon Phobos, Jupiter's moon Ganymede, Saturn's moon Iapetus, and Sirius, the largest asteroid in the asteroid belt, they are also artificial bodies masquerading as moons and or asteroid in the case of Sirius. But this whole thing about trying to convince people that you got no choice but to acknowledge the moon is artificial, therefore you have no choice but to acknowledge an ET cover-up. Do you feel that maybe is a good way to convince the public there is an ET cover-up? You got 6 minutes and 45 seconds to talk about this.
No, I don't feel that is a good way to convince the public of a cover-up. I think the best way to convince the public of a cover-up is by examining the history of government involvement in all of this through Freedom of Information Act releases, through archival research, where you can actually trace the cover-up. You can read the letters between the individuals behind this kind of cover-up and see that they are conspiring together to bring about this cover-up, and their reasons for doing that. That is the way that the public will acknowledge it. To give the public something that sounds just unbelievable so far out from mainstream science is certainly not going to convince them. The public is looking for credible information. They're looking for credible individuals who are disseminating this information to them. But I do have to tell you that the individuals who are disseminating this information are not doing it with impunity. I have recently done a study of individuals who've reported government harassment to me, and there are many individuals who are being harassed. They're being threatened. Their homes have been broken into. Things have been taken from them. There are black helicopters hovering over some of their homes. Their computers are hacked and destroyed. Their information is destroyed, or their information is taken. There is a lot going on to threaten people, to beat people down, and to prevent people from coming to the realization that this is true, or from to threaten people not to disseminate this kind of information to the public. The government does consider this to be a very huge threat. Another way that they do it is the laughter factor, the ridicule factor, that anyone who reports this kind of thing is said to be off their rocker. Anyone with any brains at all would realize that none of this was true, when actually studies have shown the higher the level of education, the more likely an individual is to realize that this is true, because they have done the research. They know the science behind it. The discrimination has to end. It's not okay for individuals to be sitting in a restaurant and to have someone come up to them knowing that they're interested in the topic of UFOs or abductions, and have their fingers spinning around in the air and making these strange UFO sounds in order to draw attention to the other people in the restaurant. It's a form of ridicule. It's not okay for an individual who hasn't to be sitting in a restaurant and to have their neighbor come in and yell from across the room that they are the guy who thinks he's seeing UFOs all over the place, when that person has never even said that. He only has an interest in the topic. But it is the ridicule factor that holds people down. If you hold an important job, and it is discovered that you are claiming that you have been abducted by aliens or had ET contact, then you might not advance in your career. You might lose your job. You might be referred to for psychiatric evaluation. If you are a commercial pilot and you report that you have observed a UFO, you immediately are taken off duty and you have to undergo a psychiatric evaluation before you can be put back on duty. Why? It makes no sense to me, but it's part of the system's way of holding people down, of keeping this information away from the public. If you are a college professor and you have an interest in this topic, and you want to do research on physical evidence relating to UFOs, you cannot get funding to do that. And if you are interested in abductions, and you do abduction research, and this is the kind of research that might hold alien abduction in a positive light scientifically, and not be a false memory syndrome study, you won't be able to have your information published in a peer-reviewed journal, and you will not be able to advance in your career because you haven't published. It's a vicious cycle. It has to end. We have to drop that ridicule factor. The topic of UFOs is a taboo subject. In anything where funding comes from the federal government, you can get federal funding to study paranormal. You can get funding to study ESP, for example. You cannot get funding to study UFOs, alien abduction, unless it's a social research project to find out what's wrong with those people who believe this is happening to them. That's what I have to stop.
Yeah, and it also has to do with,
to stop.
Yeah, also human history on planet Earth. There's that documentary called New History of Early Man, talks about how humans were in North America 250,000 years ago, long before mainstream science, and the scientists who support that lost their jobs, and those that didn't kept their jobs. It's disgusting. But anyway,
absolutely, very politically motivated.
Right.
Sorry,
well,
go
Kathleen, ahead. We have come to the end of this show, and with that being said, I have to tell you the most emotional thing in every show. I tell this to all my guests, and you'll understand why it's emotional after I tell you this. But the fact is, Kathleen, as much as you are indeed a fascinating individual, and I have no doubt that I could definitely do another show with you, I would like to tell you that one of my goals with this radio show is to get as many different people on my show as possible. Before I start giving any one specific guest double dips, I feel that that is the most impartial, the most informative, too, way of doing a radio show as well, ultimately. And that does mean that I forgot to say I probably will not be asking you to come on my show again, but that's only because I need to give thousands of other fascinating individuals a chance at some glory on my show. But I do promise you this interview will get spread far and wide. I'll upload it to YouTube so lots of other people will be able to hear it. And when I get back on Facebook again, I'll definitely post this on group pages. But it was a pleasure having you on. This was a very informative interview, and I do encourage you to keep up the good work, and I think you're worthy of another Ufologist of the Year award.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
Good to be on your show. Good luck to you with your show.
Good luck to you as well, and I'll be at the next MUFON Symposium. Maybe I'll see you at one of those summit one day in the future.
Okay.
All right. Take care now. Later.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. That's the end of this show, folks. And next week I am going to have Dave and Riki on from humanagold.ca, I believe is the website. I'm drawing a little bit of a blank here, but they were vendors at the MUFON Symposium, just like Kathy was of sorts. I think she was worthy enough of speaking there. She was just sitting at a table, but she should have been. She's worthy enough of being a speaker at that conference. But like I said, I'll see another one. So next week it's going to be Dave and Riki from humanagold.ca, who were vendors of the conference. They may not have household names, but I'll try to change that by having them on my show. So without further ado, namaste, everyone. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your trek throughout infinite consciousness. This is Andrew Fisher of Nature of Reality Radio signing off.